So we're now nearly 2 years into your term. What are some of the lessons that you've learned since being elected?
Everything takes way longer than you think it should. That's number one. I'm honestly, I'm so impressed with the residents of the City of Regina, and it's everything from our volunteers to our businesses to the sponsors who support the activities or the community-based organizations. I run into people who love this city and are incredibly passionate. Often I run into folks who have moved here from elsewhere who are sometimes more appreciative of what the city has to offer because they take time to explore all the things that we have. I think that there's far more reading than I thought there would be, but that's okay. It's good to learn about things. But yeah, I think that the City of Regina, I'm very hopeful just for how passionate the residents are and the businesses that are located here are, and just where we're situated in terms of the future for what we have to offer.
What would a successful term look like for you? Is there a specific accomplishment that would mark a successful term for you, or is there something a little bit broader than that?
I think the list is too long to have here. I think people being proud of the city they live in, which is reflective in everything from the service provision from the service of Regina being people feel like they're getting value and that we're effective at what we're supposed to do, and that's water delivery and garbage pickup and roads and all of those things, and roads are a continual challenge, I'll say that, to hosting events and inviting people into our city because we're not a natural tourist destination, so we create things to invite people into our city, and we want to be proud of those things. To having opportunity, to be proud of all of the opportunity that exists here, everything from our educational institutions to the employment that you can get here, and having a city that is beautiful. And whatever that means, and sometimes that means lighting up at Christmas time because it's pretty white and dark here in the winter time. To having beautiful park space and amenities where people can recreate and train for competitive sports, those types of things, and that our community-based organizations feel supported in the work they do. In meeting the needs that government plays, private business plays a little bit, but really there's that area in the middle where our community-based organizations, which are second to none, frankly, in terms of what I've seen from across the country. People care about where they live, they care about the people that live here. So yeah, if we can achieve those marks, if the evidence of that exists, I think it's success.
It's been a kind of different year for you here. First year of your term was dominated by COVID, a lot more limited events. This year, a lot more things have opened up, a lot more events for you to go to. What has been your favorite memory from this year from one of the events that you've attended?
Oh gosh, I think if I were to pick a big one and talk about either Agribition or Grey Cup or the Farm Show or QCX or FCM or Frost, all of those things happen only because of volunteers. Folk Festival volunteers, because it was back this year, they've got new members volunteering, but they've had volunteers that have showed up for decades. And so, the return of those kind of signature events or the creation of something like Frost is really significant. But so are the smaller ones that I attend, and I go to brownie meetings, and last night I was at the Separate School Board's high school choral concert. Just 400 students out there singing and performing for parents and family. It's everything in between. It's the amateur sports and it's the professional sports. It's the Regina Symphony Orchestra. We have a lot going on here. I keep hearing that we need to get better at really communicating all of the events that are happening. But whether it's a downtown pub hosting live entertainment, I can invite you to that too. Walk the Walk, a fundraiser for LGBTQ Two-Spirit. It's been an incredible year, and the excitement of people and community coming together is apparent everywhere I go.
Last year, the budget discussions, a lot of it was about how do we kind of shift maybe funding from police into social services. This year, the budget looks like a large discussion, or a large part of the discussion will be about addressing homelessness in some way. Did you expect homelessness to be such a large policy topic for you during your term?
Yes, I think that social issues in general, I think are front and center for every municipality across this country. I can tell you on the City Mayor's Caucus with the Saskatchewan Urban Municipalities Association, we're all talking about mental health and problematic substance use, or substance use disorder. And on the big City Mayor's Caucus, it is a topic of conversation every time we get together. I think there's a frustration from municipalities. I'm happy to share that we have a pretty limited tax resource in terms of funding, and the big pockets of money essentially from income tax and sales tax, et cetera, being collected is at the provincial and federal level. And when the systems aren't necessarily being accessed or targeted in a way that meets the needs within communities, that's frustrating. I think that the community safety and well-being, that was, I think year one, that was worked on and we passed it, and we have 6 areas of focus. And housing actually was not one of the priority areas of focus. I think we're trying to figure out how to be a better collaborator and coordinator of both the provincial and federal government funding streams, and really connecting the community-based organizations that are serving or social services with the particular unique needs of the City of Regina. And there's a lot of work to do. From a policing perspective, the reality is that they're not going on random calls. There's 100,000 calls for service, and the frontline patrol officers need to be supported. They're the Board of Police Commissioners' employees, and so they need to be supported in executing and really delivering the service that they need to deliver. And in the absence of some of the other programs and supports necessary, we're calling them in. And so I think that we need to ensure that the police can respond to the calls that they're getting, and that we continue, again, to collaborate and coordinate, targeting the folks who have mental health issues, that have substance use disorder issues, that are experiencing homelessness for a variety of issues, accessing the money that is there for them.
Is it fair that, I guess, that municipalities, they're the ones who face a large number of the complaints or the calls for action around homelessness and social issues, but they don't, like you pointed out, they don't have access to a lot of the funding that might be able to assist with them. Is it fair that is the way that things are structured right now?
I think our job as a municipality is to communicate to the other levels of governments what we're experiencing. And I think that I don't know that fairness plays into it, because ultimately we all serve the same people. We all have the same residents that we serve, regardless of the level of government. I think part of the issue is that a lot of the issues are health-related issues, mental health and substance use disorder. Those are health-related issues. When they create problems in people's lives, from their ability to live in a healthy way, social services steps in, mental health has to step in. And so I think our job, and maybe what we haven't done as good of a job as, is making sure we're communicating the information about what's happening in our city, and actually, figuring out solutions, being part of the solution. We do not have the funding sources that they have. Like, that's just full stop. Nor do we have the professional resources that they have, whether that be doctors or counselors or those types of things. And so I think we're all trying to get a bit smarter about how we do this and collaborate. I can tell you the City Mayor's Caucus in the province of Saskatchewan are united on getting better communicating the data into the province and the federal government so that they can adjust the systems necessary to meet the needs.
I want to turn to REAL. You obviously have a kind of a background with REAL, serving on its board. This year, I think it'd be fair to say we've seen a large concentration of kind of responsibility in REAL. They've taken over tourism funding. They've played a large role in the Catalyst Committee. Was that a conscious choice on your part, or is that kind of just how things have worked out at council to kind of put more responsibilities on REAL?
I think sometimes you go to where things are delivered. And so if you look at everything from, well, the list of activities that I've shown, the big events that have an enormous economic impact in the city, those are delivered in large part at one location. I can tell you that there was general frustration with tourism in the past in terms of meeting the needs of, bidding on conferences and putting on events and really supporting everything from the RCMP Heritage Museum to the Science Center to the Connexus Arts Center to the universities. Really concentrating the efforts on when we bring folks here, what's their experience when they get here. And I think because of the nature of the Exhibition Association hosting a lot of these events and having a history of hosting and creating events, there was a bit of if we have to take it away from one place so economic development can focus on economic development, which is also enormously important, that makes some sense even in the interim. So if it happens for 3 years that it gets reset, maybe it's a standalone, maybe it's a partnership with another entity, but there needed to be some specific tourism focus on it. In terms of the Catalyst Committee, I think this is just a matter of the Arena Planning Strategy Committee, because of where the Brandt Centre is located, had a previous history of being, frankly, led out of the Exhibition Association, and so the work and the process that had been developed to determine siting for an arena made some sense that it's the same process, and so why not use some of those skills that have and format or template that's already been developed for one major facility to look at the rest of the major facilities that we're contemplating over the next number of decades, I'll say.
The Catalyst Committee kind of has emerged very quickly as something that will help shape the city's downtown, like you said, for decades to come, possibly. What do you make of some of the criticism of it, that it has happened very quickly, that there has been a lack of consultation? What do you make of criticism of the Catalyst Committee?
I think I can tell you that in terms of consultation, it's the second highest amount of information coming into the city in a formal way after wastewater, I think. Or the smoking ban. Actually, it was the smoking ban. So an enormous amount of feedback has come in from the public, and I just don't think it's stopped. I think any notion that further consultation doesn't happen. There is a timeline associated with the Infrastructure Canada investment program money as it relates to the pool. And what you don't want to do is decide on where one facility goes without contemplating where the rest of the facilities go and how it could shape the entire downtown. So a little bit of the rush or that push on the time frame really is due to the ISIP funding deadline of March 31st. And so, but once one gets decided, the rest of it is still open to interpretation and further consultation. And frankly, I like the idea of focus groups. I'd like to go talk to young people and young professionals about, because the reality is if you build a facility that lasts for 30 to 35 years, it's not necessarily me. It'll be maybe you, but the 20-somethings who we want to raise their families here or to live their lives and professional lives here, and what do they want to see for their city. So I think the consultation will be ongoing. I think the push right now is really centered around an aquatic center with considering where other things could be located at the same time.
I guess what is one of the things that we've talked about, and I think council has focused on a lot this year, has been affordability and making sure that the city provides services while not passing on a large tax increase to the residents of Regina. Is there a disconnect with conversations around trying to save a few dollars here and there around some decisions at council, and then the, I guess, looming decision around this number of projects that are being addressed in the Catalyst Committee that could cost hundreds of millions of dollars? Is there a disconnect between those two?
I don't think so. Sorry. What I'll say is that the city has a responsibility to provide recreational amenities. And so I don't believe, and the information we have tells us that people want something like a Brandt Centre. Like, to not have something like a Brandt Centre really isn't an option for the future of a city that's looking to grow and attract people here. We have an enormous problem with recruitment into the city of Regina because the expectation is we have amenities and a quality of life that people could live in other similar cities that are competing for the same talent. And so this is a very future-focused type of exercise. We know that for over 13 years, an aquatic center, a pool facility, not unlike what you see in other centers, is the number one project on the master recreation plan. I think it's finding the balance between how you proceed. And all of this is dependent upon multiple levels of government helping out with funding. And so if we can build a pool and contribute 29% of the cost, I would think that makes some really good sense. Councillor Hawkins in the previous term passed a 0.5 recreation, knowing that we have to replace these facilities. There's a 0.5 mill rate increase that's on the current mill rate and has been for a number of years, looking to build up that pool of funding, essentially, to help fund these projects on an ongoing basis. We're responsible for infrastructure at the end of the day, and recreational facilities form part of that infrastructure. But the ultimate decision for when and how they happen is it's probably future council's decisions.
Do you think that this council's decisions on a lot of topics and a lot of projects, things like a new brand center, a new aquatic center, has council's hands kind of been tied by the decisions of previous councils to not fund or not make decisions on things like a new aquatic center, even though it's been a priority for more than a decade?
I think that there's always competing interests for every council to look at. And so whatever it was, to go back in time and say, well, 10 years ago, this could have been the decision. I will tell you overall, one of the lessons that I was suspected coming in was an infrastructure deficit. And I know for sure now we have an infrastructure funding deficit, as well as an infrastructure deficit for where we're trying to get to, or that plan for growth and that replacement of everything from pipes in the ground to wastewater treatment to roads. That having a serious plan about how to address that is an absolute obligation that we have to take care of. And so you're not going to fund it all at once, but you have to be able to plan rationally for the next, frankly, 25 years of infrastructure investment to ensure that we don't continue the problem of this deficit, infrastructure deficit, or that you're overburdening in any particular 1 year failed infrastructure.
I think one of the lessons from the past few years has been that things can change rapidly on the turn of a dime. Is that why planning is so important, to make sure that there is those long-term plans to make sure things aren't just suddenly having to be dropped for some reason because of whatever happens in the world?
Yes, I think that's very fair. And the reality is you make a plan with the best information you have at the time, looking forward 25 years. But there are things that arise, and so your plan always has to be slightly adaptable, and you should always be able to look at it and say, okay, we can switch X out for Y and continue on, and then not leave Y hanging out there as just some unfunded thing that we have to do in the next number of years. So the planning is enormous, and I think folks get excited when you talk about planning because everything we do is expensive. From provision of water to wastewater to garbage to roads, it's all very expensive, heavy investment type of stuff. And if you come back to the mill rate, that's where the responsibility to, on an ongoing basis, make sure that you have investment in new technology so that you can do things more effectively or more efficiently. But also we have the bulk of the infrastructure in the country, municipalities do, and continuing to advocate with both levels of government about investment in the infrastructure that, again, we all share the same residents, they're all the same voter, and so making sure that investment coming from other levels of government is proportionate to where that infrastructure exists.
Do you think that the municipality has to communicate better about the province's and federal government's role in helping to fund projects like large projects like the aquatic center? Do you think that, because I think maybe people might just intuitively believe that it's all in the city. They don't necessarily believe the province has a role.
Listen, a $100 million project doesn't happen without participation from other levels of government. And that's why we advocate with infrastructure with both the province and the feds for how they structure and design programs for the needs of communities and keeping it flexible so whatever is a priority for the city can be built within whatever program they're designing. I think that you could have stopped at, do I think we communicate well about a whole bunch of issues? We have tons of great news stories in the city, tons of wins in the last year, but we struggle sometimes to be, and it's almost a transparency issue about where money is being spent, how it's being spent, and where it's coming from. And I can tell you, both the provincial and federal government would like some credit for the amount of money that they spend in our city, because they spend an awful lot in our city. If you look at their budgets in the billions, a lot of that money is allocated into a city like Regina. So sometimes it's their ongoing operations, from everything from healthcare to social services to highways to other forms of infrastructure that we all take a little bit for granted. So if we have a problem communicating, I think that all levels of government have more work to do when it comes to where the money is going. And sometimes when you're naming numbers like $2 billion, it sort of gets lost. It's a lot of money being invested in our province.
You're the first woman to be elected as mayor in Regina. We now have the first woman appointed as city manager. What message do you think it sends that the two kind of top positions in the city government are now women?
I think it's just the time has come. I think that the majority of residents would believe that competency is not gender-based. I think that with Nikki Anderson as the new city manager, she brings a style and an approach that is unique. I like to tell people that she's really far nicer than I am, but she's focused. And I'd actually bring your attention to if you look around at the new CEOs in the province and in the city, it's been remarkable. The Saskatchewan Chamber of Commerce, PRABA. You have Penny McClune, the new CEO of SGI. You have a new woman as leader of FCL. There's been a number of CEO appointments turnover in the last 12 months. It's been kind of remarkable, actually, sort of from a rejuvenation perspective. But I just think that I don't think people generally think that competency is gender-based.
And I guess why did it take so long, I think? Why do you think that it took so long to get both of these positions, to have diversity in these positions?
Well, I think that in the terms of humanity, women have only had the vote in this country for 100 years. And so really that's my grandparents. So we're just a couple generations removed from, we're actually only a generation removed, or I am, from women significantly entering the workforce. And so I just think that oftentimes how people get promoted is they've gained experience in different industries, different organizations, education-wise and community. And so I think it's only been the last 50 or 60 years where women have entered into the workforce in a significant way and have the experience that elevates them into those leadership positions within organizations. And then once you do that, it's really, we still don't have the same number of women that run for political office as men. That's just a reality. Part of that could be time and and the desire and areas of focus that folks have in their life, not being suitable for a little bit of the 24/7 aspect of political life. But I think that people are there. They understand that people have the competency and the desire and the drive to do things that, again, gender really doesn't play into it. And it's just the evolution of how we've got here.
Reconciliation has become, I think, a larger topic in recent years. What do you do as a mayor? What does reconciliation look like for you, and what do you try to do as the mayor of Regina to promote reconciliation? So
I don't get to decide on what reconciliation is or is not. I think a big part of it is learning the truth of our history. I wasn't taught it in class. I don't know if you were taught it in high school, but I was not taught the history of our province or the history of our country in a way that was reflective of the reality of all peoples, especially the original peoples. And so a big part of what I do is relationship building, and that's with First Nations as well as First Nations, and the sovereign nations that surround us in Treaty 4, and then locally Indigenous leaders, and whether that be in community-based organizations or political organizations or business, to really understand and get to know their experience, and then to relate that into how the city deals with that. So, you know, I heard quite a bit about Indigenous procurement and that wanting and that desire and that drive to participate in the economic activity of the city. And so if we have a $200 million procurement budget, are we intentionally looking to focus on finding Indigenous owned and operated businesses and to partner with them in terms of how our procurement process works and how they can bid, and then being really sensitive to awarding contracts in a fair way, actually, for more full economic participation. That's one example. There's other things you do that are a bit more they're a bit more about community items, like the decision to host Mia Wachitowin Day on September 29th, and try to make it an educational aspect, a celebration aspect, unveiling of the Seat of Truth, but really taking our guidance from elders and Indigenous community for how can we help, how can we be a partner. Again, not for me to decide, but continually asking the question of how do we help, how do we partner, and you know, how can we play as a city a role in advancing a community where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
My final question for you is, it's now midway through your first term. Have you put much thought into running again or re-offering again?
You know what, I get asked a lot. You know, I've said it before and I'll say it again. If I feel like we've been able to progress the city in the way that I answered earlier, then I would give it serious consideration. If I believe that I'm not the right person to continue to advance the City of Regina, then I'm not the right person and someone else should do it. Someone else should step forward. But if we continue the momentum of where we're going, I would give it serious consideration. There, how's that?
That works. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thanks, Alex.